On this episode of Real Wins, we chat about the differences between a marketing team and a leasing team and why one can't do it all. Then we jump into a related topic around what modern localized multifamily marketing looks like today and how to best harness it as a tool in your property awareness toolkit. This was a fun conversation, so let's dive in. Mike, welcome back to another episode. It's great to see you again. I always have to ask, what's new with the family? Any fun weekend plans you had out there?
We had we had some fun with the family this week, and we actually a going away party for one of our friends. It's my daughter's schoolmate and the parents, and they're unfortunately moving to Florida. Fortunately, maybe for them, but unfortunately for us to be seeing them go. But it was fun little party with the fam and a bunch of kids and a bunch of people. So we had a good time. I know, unfortunately, from our pre-show chat, that your family is experiencing something entirely different.
Yes, yeah, I'm smiling right now, but I'm frowning on the inside. We had our hands full this weekend with a sick toddler, and any parents listening, it included your dose of projectile vomiting and overnight wake up. So it's been a few days of restlessness, and we're trying to. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, but we're trying to not get sick too. So we're crossing our fingers. He went to the doctor though. He's good. No issues. Just kind of trying to work through it. So you know how it is.
Yeah, well, speaking for parents everywhere, I certainly know how that goes and how brutal it can be in the thick of it. So appreciate you look wide-eyed and awake, ready to bring the heat today in this conversation. I'm excited.
Yeah, I fake it well. Let's pour one out for the parents out there. But
Nice.
Yeah, let's jump in. So we have some good topics to cover today. Two questions that are very common. I think they tie into one another really well. I want to start with one that has to do with marketing partners versus leasing teams. And the question that we get, the form of the question that we get quite often is, why do I need a marketing partner? Won't my leasing team handle X or Y or Z, depending on what the topic might be at the moment? And so I want to kick things off with that, because I'm sure you get that, especially on the leasing side, when we're considering go-to-market strategies and things on the front end, so to speak. Kick us off. Where do you start with that mindset? How do you answer that?
Yeah, I think that question comes from this, ongoing legacy mindset in multifamily where that marketing isn't that important, right? And so what's more important is just what the rent is, what the market's indicating. If we build it, they will come. We'll have renters show up, and as long as we price it right, there's going to be a market. There's this pervasive myth in the industry that is the way it goes, and I think we've seen this across many other industries where that's just a recipe for failure in so many cases. And the biggest and best businesses in the world are the ones that are really doing marketing effectively. So to bring in an agency, top-notch, creative branding, marketing agency who can help establish the go-to-market strategy overall is such a powerful tool in the developer's toolbox to really maximize revenue and maximize ROI on a project, whether it's in lease up or post-stabilized leasing.
Yeah, one of the ways that I think about it too is that there is an awareness component and then there's a sales component to this. And I don't think that marketing is necessarily trained in sales, and I don't know that leasing is necessarily trained in marketing. And so I think you have a oil and water situation right out of the gate if you consider, well, my leasing team is going to handle X, Y, or Z for me. I think a great marketing partner drives awareness. They build a brand and a brand experience around a position in an effort to push renters to make a decision, right? And when the renter gets to that point, that potential renter shows interest and they are being nurtured and they're maybe coming by for a tour, getting more serious about their decisions. That's where a leasing team can step in, and a really great salesperson on the leasing side can really step in and be effective on that end, which is, not something a marketing team is really focused.
Yeah, look, exactly. As the world has grown more complex, as the world of marketing has grown more complex, as the modes of operating properties have grown more complex, that requires more specialization to have a successfully executed experience. And so it's important to say, okay, there we have a marketing agency who is absolutely specialized in driving awareness, all those things, creating demand for the product, really building a differentiated value around the project. And at the same time, though, you need that local boots on the ground professional salesperson or salespeople who can actually build the confidence in the residents who are coming in the door to make a decision to live in that community. And these two roles, they have to be closely aligned for it to work well. They should be closely aligned for it to work well, but they're two different roles, two different functions, and they should be treated as such. And I think, again, that's a place where there's a lot of big misses in the industry, where you have owners and developers relying on local operators, or property managers or leasing people to put up a templated website, for example, or pick out a logo from randomlogoshop.com or whatever, instead of actually working with an agency, partnering with an agency to build a holistic go-to-market campaign that is aligned with the salespeople, so that there's everything from the awareness and demand generation all the way through the nurturing and closing of those prospective residents, leads to better results and just a better resident experience overall.
Talk to me a little bit more about the sales side of that conversation, because this is something that has also come up recently, and it has to do with the notion that you need to sort of consider your leasing team as a professional sales team. And by that, taking that step further, I should say, you need to really consider training your leasing team on tactics, sales tactics, and ways to close deals, not to make it sound, binary necessarily, but there is an aspect there that is, your marketing team is not going to close the deals for you, and your leasing team is going to be sort of burdened with that responsibility. And if you just have a leasing team that's full of friendly faces and great personalities, that's only going to get you so far. And I've seen that come up time and time again, over the last few years, certainly, but even in recent months when we've seen some conversations around this. We spoke about it recently on a Transforming Cities article. I know that you post about this. Maybe you could kind of tie a bow on that idea and why you think that's so important.
Yeah, I will certainly try to tie a bow, and let me get on my soapbox for a minute or two and
Sure,
wrap this
sure.
gift. So I think, again, another legacy concept in the business is that the people who are doing leasing are often entry-level property managers. They want to be property managers. And so they're like, okay, Tom over there, property manager, has a great personality. He'll be good at sales. He's thrown into it with no process, no training, no alignment with marketing, or very limited on all those aspects. And he's just getting by on his, charm and personality, if you're lucky, right? And it's okay, but it often leads to problems. It often leads to slow absorption. It often leads to indecision by prospective residents that walk in the door. And so the far better way is to have people in that leasing role, to go back to the specialization point I made earlier, but people in that leasing role who are professional leasing people, professional sales people, and who are trained on it, who are given the tools, the sales enablement tools, the nurturing tools to build the interest of the prospective resident coming in the door, and to give them the opportunity, again, to build their confidence to make a decision to choose to live in this community in a much more robust way. And that's where those professional leasing teams and people really come in and can help you unlock that much faster absorption to really actually make that marketing investment work much better, because they have this much better toolbox skill set to close leases and really help people make that decision to live in the amazing community that I'm sure we're all talking about here. So I think that's the big trick, and it's such often a miss, because you have this, again, entry level property manager who is usually doing the best they can, but they don't have the right skills or tools to do the leasing job effectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a really great point. And another thing too to consider with this marketing and leasing team dynamic, because this is I'll call it a sub question that comes up a lot, is, well, that's great. You have this, fully robust go-to-market strategy for my property, but I don't want to hire my leasing team, 12 months in advance or 8 months in advance. I'm going to be losing money. And I think an important distinction to make here is that your marketing team doesn't need your leasing team to be hired and on board for the same amount of time. There's a lot of work and due diligence and creation and building that happens well before a leasing team is brought on board. And in fact, I think that's actually a really great area where marketing and leasing overlap when it comes to nurturing renters, because a lot of that can be handled by a great marketing partner. Let's call it month over month with nurture campaigns and retargeting campaigns. And you don't necessarily need a leasing team to do that. You don't even need a single, leasing salesperson on board to do that, as long as the marketing team is getting development updates, right, from the property from ground zero to then put into these nurture campaigns. So I just wanted to say that out loud because I've heard that a lot too, or I'll have conversations a lot where there's concern around excess spending. But I think what we're advocating here for is a delineation between creative and sales, and not to boil it down to too fine of a like basics there, but I do think there is marketing, and then there's a handoff, and then there's sales. And I think leasing team needs to be focused on selling and getting the leases signed.
Yeah, totally. And I think what both of us are advocating for is smarter spending, smarter investing, not necessarily just more. In some cases, more is smarter. However, it's also the case. I think you raised a great point there, because that is the misperception is, oh, if we start early with this process, that means I got to hire my leasing team so early, and I get this extra salary load on the property. Well, 2 points there. One, that's not true to the point you just made. And two, if you do it right and you actually create or hire an outsourced fractional leasing team, professionals that can come in and do the job, get it done, and then leave, you don't have an expense on the property for excess staffing on an ongoing basis. So it's not too early. It's not forever. It's for a short period of time to get the job done and then get out of there. And so that's why we've built our centralized on-demand leasing platform the way we have, because it works so effectively to have those professionals who can specialize for a short period of time on a specific property, again, on a fractional on-demand basis. So you don't have the heavy expense. In fact, you have usually less expense and certainly better performance. And so that's where all this opportunity, I think, is that is, yeah, it's hard to build. It's hard to figure out how to do it, but there are certainly ways to do it. And it's honestly we discovered this problem. And it's one of the reasons we exactly built the service that we built with the professional leasing team on a fractional on-demand basis. And it's worked remarkably well. And I speak highly enough of why it makes so much sense.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real Wins. Brought to you by Authentic, delivering premier multifamily brand experiences and smart digital marketing. Authentic's proven approach accelerates leasing velocity, boosts rental rates, and increases long-term value. You can find out more at authenticff.com. And by Charlesgate, the multifamily investor's secret weapon to help underwrite, go to market, and operate projects that generate market-beating returns. With an adaptive staffing model and on-demand leasing teams, Charlesgate empowers a better resident experience at an efficient cost structure for today's owners. Visit charlesgate.com for more. This leads into our second question really, really well, because I think some of the things that we're going to talk about on this second point really focus in on, I guess, some things that I've seen if a leasing team takes over, call it older ideas or quick fixes. But the second question is really focused around this idea of how do we approach modernizing the idea of localized multifamily marketing. That topic and theme comes to us in a few different ways. We certainly see it being written about across the industry quite a bit. I'm gonna toss this one over to you to start with, Mike. Again, maybe before you kind of dive into your first point or two, can you give us like a high level? What do you mean by localized multifamily marketing, just to set the table?
Well, first of all, I think, all these things we talk about with, the branding and the differentiating factors and the beautiful design and even the bigger picture, broader marketing campaigns, which, digital marketing and otherwise, I think are all critically important. But what's also can be very important is making sure you're talking to and getting in touch with local employers, or getting in touch with, and building community with local businesses and local shops and things like that. Also, there is, for example, even just, doing sort of more lead gen type ads, prospecting ads, like whether it's Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, or setting up a Google business profile, or even social media interactions in many cases are much more powerful, really, really driven at a local level versus an agency level. And I think all of these things come into play as far as really establishing those roots, those local roots, those community roots that can really help take what you've built from a brand and messaging and differentiating standpoint, and really kind of take that and fit it within the context of the local community, and building up and establishing demand from the really micro, local, and neighborhood level as well.
Yeah. And so some of these things that we just talked about, so Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist ads, local employment targets, local shops, restaurants, and so forth. I think we were kind of joking before the call here about kind kind of like pre-podcast notes about posting flyers in coffee shops, and you kind of go into these coffee shops and you see them everywhere, of course. And does that work? I don't know. I would say the jury's out on that one. Certainly doesn't work alone. And I think that's the point that we wanted to touch on here is it's great if you get a Craigslist ad up. It's great if you throw some flyers up. It's great if you reach out to a few, local places of employment, maybe do a little like trade, hey, coffee shop coupons for my new renter, so forth. But that's not a go-to-market marketing strategy for a multifamily property in 2024. And so just like posting to an ILS is not your only paid outbound to try to find these and source these great new renters for your property, nor is posting at a coffee shop and hoping that your building's going to get full because of that.
Yeah, look, without a doubt, I think that for example, that I can illustrate that pretty specifically. In many cases, when developers go in, and especially in emerging markets and markets that you're expanding on what is the established housing stock in a community, which happens more and more, especially in areas like New England where there's not a ton of land to develop, and so you can't just be relying on going up to the local coffee shop or a local shop and hanging a flyer, because frankly you need to cast a wider net to attract the residents who can afford and maybe wanting to pay the rent to live in the community that you're building, and so there's a lot of factors that come in. Now that said, I think there is a unique opportunity to be working with some of these local amenities, whether it's coffee shops, service providers, to partner with them and help expose each other to a wider audience. And so there's some creative marketing you can certainly be doing that go far beyond just, again, posting a flyer or posting some ads in a local town, Facebook group or Facebook Marketplace, or these things, which again are part of the tools in the toolbox. But it fundamentally, what is most important is that there's a strategy that says, okay, we understand who our audience is going to be. We've built messaging for that audience that are going to resonate with them and attract them. We are using that messaging repeatedly, early, often, and continuously to make sure that message is resonating and we're attracting the right audience. And then we're capitalizing that on the local level as well and expanding that at the local level. So people see, okay, we're in this cool, unique, interesting new community. There's these cool, interesting, unique shops or local establishments or whatever it might be within those neighborhoods or communities that will help also attract people to this in the way that really can accelerate the demand. But like just relying on that stuff is not going to work unless you just want to be, the quote unquote low cost provider, or you coming in and, listing rents that are below what they otherwise could be with the proper strategy and investment in the holistic marketing stack.
Yeah. So let's riff on a few modernizing techniques.
Yeah.
So number one, I think the Google My Business listing is important. Have you seen something similar in your area?
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, people are online, they're searching. Assuming your ads and your brand awareness is working well, people are going to perhaps see your ads and start Googling the property. And to have a Google Business listing or other things is an important piece of that sort of search engine optimization puzzle.
Yep, I think Google My Business is definitely a top priority these days to show up in local search, hands down. Another one I've been seeing recently, and I'll use Colorado as an example. There's a large military presence in Colorado. There's a variety of bases up and down the Front Range. And one unique technique I've seen a local partner of ours use is to get in the kind of the welcome packet, so to speak, the new employment new team member employment packet at these bases, so that when they move there with their families, they have this property right in front of them in every single packet. And I think that's a great way to kind of tie in the local industry with your property. And that furthermore builds on top of some of the things you mentioned, Mike, around, coffee shops, car washes, and so forth. So I think that's old school in a way, but it's still like a very modern way of thinking about it.
Totally. And that's a critical piece of the puzzle. And one, fast way to kind of modernize that is to use a social network that most people don't think about for a B2C, which is LinkedIn. But the nice thing about LinkedIn, you can still actually target by employers and employees of certain employers. So it's a really cool tool to use selectively, because it's very expensive actually compared to like some of these other avenues on the whole. But if you know who your audience is, where they're working specifically, it's a great tool to also think about using as a tool in the toolbox for some, modern local employer demand generation strategy or tactics.
That's a great, yeah, that's a great suggestion. I hadn't even thought about that, but that's a great one. I'm actually curious what listeners think too. So if anyone's listening and you've used, any specific sort of localized tactics, definitely reach out, let us know. I'd be curious to hear what's working and maybe even what's not working that seems like it should be working, but it's maybe a little bit underwhelming. Um, Before we bring this one home, Mike, anything else to mention in terms of this localized mindset? Knowing that it's not necessarily the marketing plan, but additional
Yeah.
tools in the toolkit.
No, yeah, totally. I mean, the way I think about this is I think it's important to, I think I mentioned earlier, sort of set down, establish roots for the community, and to think about it from a partnership standpoint with some of the local establishments, and again, whether it's a coffee shop, a restaurant, a unique local store or whatever. Why not do things so it's so relative, I shouldn't say so cheap and easy, but it's relatively cheap and easy even to go in with an iPhone these days and do a little kind of short interview, something that you can have with someone to talk about their shop, and use that as a nurturing tool for the restaurants. Hey, meet the local barista, meet the local shop owner, whatever it might, things like that can go a long way to really, again, establishing and building communities. You can tap into their audiences as well. Even if it's a small audience, it's still really, I think, helpful to building that partnership and building those local roots to help understand what it's like to live in this community, not just in the property. So things like that can go a long ways. That so-called user-generated type content, and whether it's done by the leasing team, or even better, if you've got your marketing agency that can provide the tools for the leasing people or the leasing teams and the property management teams to use and set up sort of simpler ways for that to do it. So I think there's a lot of ways to really engage the local market in a more powerful and modernized way, to expand upon a lot of these tactics to create more awareness, more demand.
Yeah, this isn't a social media episode, but I think you make a great point there because, social media, like I'll call it Instagram landing pages, are so simple and sort of boring many times these days. But that's a really quick and easy way to go around, introduce the neighborhood and say, here's the barista. Hey, here's the person who works at the grocery. Hey, here's the deli person. Hey, here's the cool this, and this. And scatter that throughout your landing page for Instagram. Great idea. Would take half a day. Your marketing team could do it. The leasing professional could do it. The more you kind of sit with this concept and this idea of localized, you can come up with 20 ideas pretty quickly. So I think that's a pretty powerful tool to add to that tool.
No doubt.
Mike, it's already almost 23 minutes behind us here. We're always move through these pretty quickly, and I like the format. So it's always a pleasure to chat with you and get your insights. And I'm looking forward to the next one. So I would love to hear from any listeners about your localized ideas. I'll share this out on social as well to make sure we can get some cool answers coming in the door. But thanks for your time, Mike. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, Chris, awesome talking to you once again. Appreciate it. Maybe we should ask the audience if we should do this more often.
Yeah. Yes. Audience, let us know. Are we talking to ourselves, or is this helpful? I hope it's helpful. I think it is. Feels fun.
No, I'm excited. I'm excited to continue the conversation. I think we've got a lot of interesting things and fun things to talk about that can hopefully help, frankly, us and a lot of other people out there.
All right. Thanks, Mike. We'll see you next time.